A token is a digital representation of some shared value. The value can be intrinsically digital with no external physical form, or be a receipt or title for a material item or property. A purely digital token represents value directly, where the other references the value itself, or at least a claim to it. For example, a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin is intrinsically digital since it has no referenced physical form, but 1 kilogram of tokenized gold would. This sounds complicated, but it really isn't. The concepts of tokenization are widely understood. It's just that they're communicated and taught using different terminology, or in some new technical context that can confuse those trying to grasp the concept. The token taxonomy framework establishes common ground for all who want to understand tokens, and even begin defining their own. The token taxonomy framework bridges the gap between blockchain developers, line of business executives, and the legal regulatory folks, allowing them to work together to model existing and define new business models and networks based on tokens. The TTF is great for learning about tokenization as well as establishing standard terms and definitions so that collaborating with others becomes easier. Just as important as understanding what the TTF is what it isn't. It is not an implementation-specific programming language or a regulatory framework, or even finished for that matter. Once you've gotten up to speed on understanding the basic terms and concepts, the TTF is most useful as a tool. Specifically, it's a composition tool that lets you examine existing tokens by understanding their parts, or lets you design your own token using those reusable parts. Before we dive into the TTF, let's look at the TTF Visual Designer to show you what I'm talking about. The tool organizes the TTF into 3 categories: artifacts, which are reusable ingredients used to make tokens; formulas, which are like an ingredient list needed to make a token; and definitions, which are the specific instructions for mixing the ingredients together as a recipe to create a token. Using the TTF to compose a new token is simple. I start by creating a list of ingredients needed, the formula. Then, once I've completed it, I finish the recipe by providing the details about how the ingredients mix together for my token to function as desired, which is the definition. Notice that the TTF does simple validation while I'm using it. For example, preventing me from including ingredients that cannot go together, like transferable and non-transferable. My token can't be both. Okay, enough of that. We'll revisit the visual tool later in the series. So let's dive in and start understanding the TTF. Terms. Let's start with some common terms and lay a foundation. As I mentioned, the TTF is a composition framework, meaning it allows tokens to be broken down into basic reusable parts. Their base token types, behaviors, and properties. A composition of these parts is called a token template. A token template is like a recipe. As I mentioned before, it describes the token that will be made by following the recipe, like what capabilities or restrictions a token created from the template would have. A template has 2 parts: a template formula, as we discussed previously, and a template definition, which is based off the formula and provides the details about the components or ingredients in context with each other to define a token. This is like the step-by-step instructions for the recipe. A token class is a deployed token from a template, or in our analogy, the result of our recipe. If, for example, we were using a cake recipe, the class would be the actual cake. A token instance is a single token in a token class, or in the cake example, it's a slice of the cake. So, to summarize, using the TTF, tokens are defined using a template, which is like a recipe. The template has 2 parts: a formula, which is like a recipe's ingredient list, and a definition, which are the step-by-step instructions for that recipe. Artifacts. The TTF is comprised of artifacts. All the components or ingredients used are artifacts. For that matter, templates are artifacts themselves. An artifact is just a standard way of describing something that belongs in the TTF. They are a verbose description of the TTF component it represents, with placeholders for settings or properties that the artifact can have when it's used. Every artifact has an artifact symbol, which contains a unique identifier as well as a visual and tooling representation used in the taxonomy. A template formula, or the ingredient list, uses a lightweight reference to an artifact based on its unique identifier, where a definition uses a value reference that includes the settings and property values to be applied to the artifact for that specific definition. You use the artifacts in the TTF to create new artifacts like template formulas or definitions. You can also create new component artifacts to be used in formulas and definitions. I like to think of artifacts as Legos. I can combine them together to basically build anything that I want, or I can buy a specific Lego set to build a castle that has all the Legos I need, along with a step-by-step assembly manual for me to follow to build the castle so that it looks just like the one on the box. Just like Legos, artifacts come in different shapes and sizes that can be categorized. You have your common 2x3s and 2x2s, as well as specialized parts with different angles and stuff. You also have some assembled Lego parts that always go together, like windows and the shutters that go with them, or a wheel and its tire. So, TTF artifacts are categorized into 5 basic types. There are base types. These are the foundational bases of tokens. Think of these as the green, flat, wide base Legos that you can build a castle on top of. Next are behaviors. These are capabilities or restrictions that can apply to a token. These are the regular Legos. Behavior groups are a bundle of behaviors that frequently go together, like the window or the tire, where you have the two parts that always go together. Property sets are defined properties, or a set of properties that, when applied to a token, can support a value that can be queried or set. And lastly, the token templates, which we've talked about a good bit in the introduction. That concludes part 1 of the introduction. In the next section, we'll go into more detail about the taxonomy itself.